He had been sending money to another woman for 23 years. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the funeral, while looking for the password to his email account. My daughter had known since she was 19. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was looking for a login to his online pharmacy account. There were 2 refills left on a prescription, and the pharmacist had told me I could transfer them to a new doctor's name. Practical things. Grief does that. It shrinks you down to the size of paperwork. I found the password in his desk drawer, inside a small leather notebook he'd carried for 30 years. I sat in his chair and opened his email on the desktop computer he'd kept in the corner of the study, like it was standing guard over something. The inbox was ordinary enough at first: hardware store newsletters, a notice from the Homeowners Association, a condolence message from a man I didn't recognize. Then I scrolled down. There were receipts, dozens of them, wire transfer confirmations spanning back over a decade, all originating from an account I'd never seen listed anywhere. Not our joint checking, not the savings account I used for groceries and utilities, a third account, a separate one, in his name alone. Each transfer went to a woman named Colette Hargrove. I said the name out loud in the empty room. Colette. I turned it over like something found at the bottom of a box, something I'd never put there and couldn't explain. Then I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, his side, which I hadn't sat on since the night before his cardiac arrest, and I stayed there until the light changed outside. He had managed our finances for 41 years. I had let him because that's what I'd done. He was an engineer. He was organized. I was a librarian. I liked books. I trusted him the way you trust the floor beneath your feet. Not because you've tested it, but because you've never fallen through. I had never fallen through, until now. That evening, I called my daughter. I said I needed to talk. She arrived within the hour, which told me something before she even sat down. She brought her coat inside, instead of hanging it by the door. She held it in her lap the entire time, like a shield she hadn't decided whether to use. "Mom," she said, "let me explain." She already knew what I'd found. She'd known, she told me, since she was 19 years old. There had been an emergency, a car accident, money needed fast. She'd called her father, and he had told her about the other account, told her never to mention it to me, and transferred enough to cover the repairs and the deductible. She signed nothing. There was nothing to sign, just a silence that had lasted 24 years. She said she thought it would end, that whatever it was would burn itself out, and there was no reason to blow up the family over something that might resolve itself. I looked at my daughter, the woman I'd nursed through pneumonia twice, whose wedding dress I'd altered by hand, whose name I'd chosen from a book I checked out of the library the week I found out I was pregnant, and I did not recognize her. "You chose him," I said. She flinched. "It wasn't like that. You chose his secret over your mother, for 24 years. She didn't answer. She stared at her coat instead. That night I didn't sleep. I moved through the house the way you move through a place that no longer makes sense, opening cupboards, closing them. I ran my finger along the countertop we'd picked out together in 1988. The grout had yellowed at the corners. I had never noticed before. I found my son at the hardware store where he worked weekends. He saw me come in and his face arranged itself into something careful. Not surprised. Careful. I asked him directly, the way I should have asked his father years ago. "Did you know about Colette Hargrove?" He breathed out slowly. Yes. His sister had told him 6 years earlier. He had not borrowed money from the account. He wanted me to know that. He said it quickly, as though the geography of his complicity mattered. He had just known. He had let it sit inside him like a stone he'd never thought to hand to me. I told him I needed him to understand what that meant. He said he was sorry. Sorry is a word, I told him. A word isn't enough. I drove home and pulled out the box where I kept our important documents. Tax returns, bank statements, the deed to the house. I had signed my name on 100 pieces of paper over 4 decades without reading most of them. Not because I was foolish, because I trusted the man who handed them to me. I called a lawyer the next morning, not the one we'd used for our joint will. I couldn't walk into that office. I called a woman named Anita Reese. I'd seen her name on a flyer at the library years ago and written it in the back of my planner for reasons I couldn't have explained at the time. Some things you file away because some part of you already knows. Her office smelled like strong coffee and something faintly citrusy. She had short gray hair and steady hands. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. When I finished, she leaned forward. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to know what's mine," I said, "and whether I can still get it back." She opened a legal pad. "The house first," she said. "Is it joint tenancy?" I didn't know. I told her so. She made a note. "We'll find out. If it is, it transfers to you automatically. It never goes to probate." "And the money he was sending?" She set down her pen. "If he was moving funds from your joint investment accounts into that separate account, and you have the records, that qualifies as dissipation of marital assets. Those funds belong to the marital estate. You have a claim." I slid the folder across the desk. Email receipts. A year's worth of transfer confirmations I'd printed the night before, hands steadier than I expected. She looked at them for a long time. "Well," she said quietly, "he was consistent, I'll give him that." She explained my options carefully, without jargon. The documented transfers could be recovered from his estate before any distribution. His estate also included a small investment portfolio held in his name alone, opened before our marriage. And if he had expressed any wishes about that in writing, we needed to know. I found the letter in his desk 2 days later. Not a formal codicil to our will. We had a joint will that split everything equally between the children. But there was a handwritten letter dated 8 months before his cardiac arrest, addressed to a personal attorney I'd never met, expressing his intention to transfer the premarital account to Colette Hargrove upon his death. It wasn't legally binding the way a formal will amendment would be, but it was his wish, written in his hand, sent to an office I hadn't known existed. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I drove to the address from the email receipts. A small house in a quiet development 2 towns over, beige siding, a blue front door, a ceramic rooster by the mailbox and window boxes, with dried lavender that hadn't been replaced since autumn. The kind of house that says, "I have made my peace with..." She answered on the second knock. A few years younger than me, I guessed. Trim, well-dressed, with tired eyes that had been expecting this visit longer than I had been planning it. "You must be his wife," she said. "Yes," I said. "May I come in?" She stepped back. I stepped forward. The living room was quiet. No photographs of him, not one. Just neutral furniture and books stacked on the coffee table and a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim, which, for some reason, made me feel the most exhausted I had felt in months. "I didn't know he was married," she said, before I could begin. "Not for the first 10 years. He told me he was widowed." I absorbed that. "And when you found out?" She looked at the window. By then it was already. She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "He lied to both of us," I said. She nodded, slowly and without defense. "I didn't come here to accuse you," I said. "I came to ask something. The money he sent over those years, a portion of it came from accounts we held jointly as a married couple. My attorney tells me those funds belong to the marital estate." She didn't look surprised. She looked like she'd been holding this moment in her chest for weeks. "What do you need?" she asked. "A documented return of the marital funds, and a disclaimer on whatever letter he left with his attorney." She was quiet for a long moment. "And if I don't, I'll pursue the dissipation claim through probate court. It will be public record, it will be documented, and it will take however long it takes." She looked at me without hostility. Something closer to a long, tired recognition. "He always said you were practical," she said. "He said a lot of things that weren't true," I replied. "That one happened to be right." She agreed to contact her own attorney. She agreed to disclaim the letter and arrange a return of documented funds to the estate. I thanked her, not warmly but honestly. We were 2 women who had trusted the same man and lost the same years. She no more deserved my cruelty than I deserved hers. I drove home in the dark and sat in the kitchen and did not turn on any lights for a while. My granddaughter showed up at the door that evening. She's 17, all sharp opinions, and a camera she carries everywhere. Her mother had told her something was wrong, which is how the young always find out what the older ones are trying to manage quietly. She looked at my face and said, "Grandma, tell me what happened." I told her, "Not everything at once, just the shape of it. The way you describe a storm by naming the direction of the wind rather than counting every raindrop." She sat across from me at the kitchen table with her palms flat on the wood, the way she'd done as a small child, and listened without moving. Then she said, "I would have told you." "I know," I said. She looked at me steadily. "I'm not taking their side." "You're not taking sides," I told her. "You're just refusing to lie. That's different." She stayed 3 nights. She did the dishes without being asked, fixed the back gate hinge that had been loose for 2 years, and sat with me in the evenings without filling the silence with noise. That last part, that is rarer in a person than any particular skill. On the second evening, she found the folder on the counter. The transfer receipts, the letter, Anita's notes. "Can I read it?" she asked. I nodded. She read carefully, turning each page with both hands, like someone who understood she was handling something heavy. When she finished, she set it down. "He had so many chances," she said. "Even after everything, so many chances to come clean, and he never took a single one." "No," I said. She twisted a ring on her finger, a thrift store find she'd mentioned once. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the first time I signed a financial document without reading it," I said. "Start paying attention." She smiled. It was small and tired and the realest thing in the room. When she left Sunday evening, she hugged me longer than usual. She asked if she could come back. "This house will always be open to you. Always." My daughter came by the following week. She wanted to explain more, to be understood. I told her she was welcome, and I meant it. She sat across from me, tight-shouldered, looking older than the grief had earned. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Neither am I said. We sat with that. Then she said, "I was 19, I was scared. He made me feel like keeping quiet was protecting the family." "You were protecting him," I said gently. "Those are 2 different things." She shook her head slowly. I thought it would end. But it didn't. No, she looked at her hands, it didn't. I set a small envelope on the table in front of her. Photographs. Her as a newborn in the hospital. Her at 5 on the front porch with a gap-toothed smile. Her at her college graduation, holding her diploma, me gripping her arm like I was afraid she'd float away. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "You're my daughter. Nothing changes that." She pressed the envelope to her chest. "But I'm done pretending the last 24 years unfolded the way I thought they did," I said. "And I'm done letting love be the reason I stop asking questions." Her eyes filled. She didn't cry. We sat together for another hour, not fighting, not forgiving, just existing in the same space with the same loss measured from different angles. When she left, she hugged me. It was the first honest hug we'd had in longer than I could place. My son came by that weekend. He stood in the kitchen doorway, uncertain whether he'd been invited, which he hadn't been. Not exactly. I asked him to sit, made coffee. We talked around things for 20 minutes, and then he said, "I should have told you. I know that." "Yes," I said. "I was trying to protect her," he said. "She was already in it. I didn't want to pull her in deeper." "You made it worse by staying quiet," I said. But I said it without anger. Anger had settled by then into something quieter and more useful. He nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now," I said. "Just honesty, going forward, just that." He looked at me the way you look at someone you've been seeing every day but somehow never really seeing. Maybe he was. Anita called 2 weeks after my visit with Colette. The disclaimer had been signed and notarized. The calculation of marital funds, based on documented transfers over 15 years, as far back as records clearly showed, came to a figure that made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. Not because it was a fortune. Because it was real. Because it had a number attached to all those years of telling myself we were being careful. All those years of feeling vaguely ashamed when I spent anything on myself that wasn't strictly necessary. "That money is yours," Anita said. "We'll work through probate to recover it properly." "And the house?" "Joint tenancy," she confirmed. "It transferred to you the moment he died. It was already yours." I thanked her and set down the phone and sat in the kitchen without moving for a long time. Then I called my daughter and my son separately. I told each of them I was updating my estate documents. Everything would go into a trust. The sole beneficiary would be their daughter, my granddaughter, her education, her future, her beginning. My daughter was quiet for a moment. "That's not fair," she said. I didn't argue with her about fairness. It felt like arguing about weather. What I said was, "You made your choices. I'm making mine." My son called back an hour later and said he understood. I told him that meant more than he knew. The weeks that followed were quiet and purposeful. Anita guided me through each step. Accounts separated and consolidated. Beneficiary designations updated on everything. The trust filed and sealed. At the bank, the young man at the desk looked at the paperwork and asked if there was anything I'd like to keep joint. "No," I said. He nodded and continued. On the way home, I stopped at the small cafe near the library where I'd worked for 32 years. I ordered tea and sat by the window and watched people walk past with their ordinary weekday lives and felt, for the first time in many months, that I could breathe all the way down. I listed the house the following month. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The rooms were full of a life I was done maintaining like a museum. I wanted 4 walls that were mine because I had chosen them, not because I had stayed long enough in someone else's story to inherit them by default. The house sold in 11 days, a young couple expecting their first child. The agent said they cried on the walkthrough. I signed the papers and drove home one last time. I went through each room without ceremony. The scuff on the hallway baseboard, the window in the study that had always stuck in summer, the place on the kitchen floor that creaked, which I had stopped noticing years ago and was only now hearing again. I locked the front door and left the key in an envelope. My granddaughter texted the morning I moved into the new apartment. She'd asked for the address 2 weeks earlier, and I'd given it to her without thinking about what that meant. That she'd asked, that she'd wanted it, that the wanting was uncomplicated. She sent a photograph she'd taken from the street below. The 2 east-facing windows of the second floor, lit from inside. The lake just visible at the edge of the frame. "It already looks like you," she wrote. I moved in with almost nothing. A kettle, my books, my mother's quilt, the folder of photographs I'd labeled mine. The first morning, I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and watched the light come across the water. It was very quiet. Not the quiet of a house waiting for someone to come home. A different kind, the kind that belongs entirely to whoever is standing in it. I've started walking the lake path in the mornings. I meet the same dog walkers, the same power walkers in their matching visors, the same elderly man who nods at me from his bench like we've agreed on something. No one here knows my story. I offer them nothing except a good morning, and they offer me the same, and somehow that is exactly enough. I went back to the library on a Thursday, not as a librarian, but as a patron, checked out 3 novels and a field guide to coastal birds, which I know nothing about but wanted to learn. The woman at the desk stamped my card and smiled, and I thought, this is how it starts. You don't announce yourself free. You just start making decisions that assume you already are. I keep a notebook on the kitchen table now. Some mornings I write 1 line and then go about my day. Other mornings the pages fill before the kettle's done. I wrote something last week that I've come back to every morning since. He kept his secret for 23 years. I kept his silence for 41. We were both afraid, just of different things. I don't know yet what I'll do with any of it. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's enough. To have said it somewhere. To have given it a place outside of my own chest. My granddaughter is coming next weekend. She'll take photographs of things other people walk past without stopping. I'll make good coffee and we'll sit at the small round table by the window and not fill all the silence because neither of us feels the need to anymore. If this found you at the right moment, if you've ever signed something without reading it, or stayed quiet to keep a peace that wasn't real, or looked up one Tuesday afternoon and realized the story you'd been living in was not the one you thought, share it with someone who needs to hear that the fine print still matters. On the house, on the marriage, on yourself. It is never too late to read it.